What do the origin of money and a demon named Baphomet have to do with the spiritual war? Let's enter the buzzsaw. Welcome to Buzzsaw, where we cut through the mainstream narrative to explore the hidden truths. I'm your host, Sean Stone. Tracy Twyman is joining me today. She's a non-fiction writer on esoteric history, mythology, occultism, and other odd topics. Her most well-known books include Clock Shavings, The Merovingian Mythos, Solomon's Treasure, and Money Grows on the Tree of Knowledge. Her latest book is Baphomet, The Temple Mystery Unveiled, co-written with Alexander Rivera of the EyeOnEye.com. Twyman has appeared on several radio shows, television shows, documentaries, and today she joins me to discuss the esoteric imprints of the Knights Templar from the past to the present. So let's start by talking about these Knights Templar. Many people have heard of them. We know that in the 14th century that they were persecuted all across the Catholic world, but why were they persecuted?
Well, it had to do with accusations of heresy and blasphemous rituals that they were accused of performing. So there was, of course, it was a order of crusading knights, chartered by the church. And so, obviously, if this information came out, it was bad. It all came from a person who had been a member of the order and got kicked out, and so he went to actually the King of France and told him, well, it wasn't him necessarily, but someone in his administration, and told him these facts, or what he alleged had occurred when he was a member of the Templars. He said that they had a blasphemous initiation ritual that involved denying Christ, spitting on the cross, and then engaging in bizarre sexual behaviors. So during initiation, supposedly you would have to kiss the behind of another Templar while you were there. And then he actually also said that they would take oaths to, instead of having sex with women, they would have sex with each other. That was somehow purer. And then there were even worse accusations as well, that sometimes they did have sex with female prostitutes, but when they did that, they would actually either abort and kill the fetus, or let the baby be born and kill it also. All of these really nasty things. So basically, they were accused of witchcraft, and the King of France put them on trial, and they were tortured into confessing a lot of these things. The amazing thing, though, is a lot of the confessions are really consistent. So, it wasn't necessarily because of the torture that they were saying what they were saying, And then the Pope also interrogated them. They confessed the same things to him without torture, and eventually they were actually executed by the French government. So,
But they were persecuted across the Catholic realm. It was also all the way to Spain, I believe, and some of them apparently found exile. They found asylum in Scotland, for example. So there was this persecution beyond France. No?
Oh yeah. Well, the French king actually, not just him, but several kings before him too. France had a great deal of influence on the papacy at the time, and actually the seat of the papacy had been moved to France. So they were really sort of in control of the Pope, and they made him disband the order and have all of these knights arrested all over Europe. It was across the Christian world. These knights were arrested. Now, not all of them were killed. I mean, most people think that they all got burnt at the stake, but only a few of them did, but the leader did. Yeah, Jacques de Molay got executed, and several of the other leaders, and then the rest just they had to do penance, and some of them even joined some of the other knightly orders. But yeah, it's this aspect. It's this story in history where everybody thinks of it as this wrongful, like you said, persecution. Mm-hmm. So it's been fashionable for a long time to think that they weren't guilty of these things, but I found some evidence that actually they were, and So I don't think that necessarily they were false accusations. I'm not saying they should be burned at the stake, but...
Well, what would the evidence be that you would say that you think that they actually were guilty of these heresies?
Well, we have a 600-page book sort of really all about that, but just one of the most striking examples is that in 2001, someone working for the Vatican, her name was Barbara Frail, she found a document that dated from those times. It was in the Vatican archives, and it is the records of this trial I said that the Pope gave them also, the second trial, which nobody knew about until then. So this is new information, and like I said, they weren't tortured by the Pope's people when they were interrogated. So, again, there's no real reason to think that they were making it up. They confessed the same things. They confessed not as much the ritual sacrifice. They didn't deal with that topic for some reason, but they did confess to the homosexual acts. They admitted that it was part of their initiation, their oath when they joined. Like I said, they would vow to not have sex with women, and specifically to not deny their brothers' sexual advances if they were presented with them. So, it seems like they were guilty of those things. They confessed. Well, here's the interesting thing. Okay, the Vatican put this information out. This woman found the document in 2001. Then in 2007, they started talking about it publicly. In 2011, she put out a book about it. And there were press releases about it. This was a big event for the Vatican to announce this thing. Mm-hmm. Now, they presented it as though the Templars had been absolved. That was actually the headline in newspapers. And not just absolved, but like innocent is mm-hmm. what is being described as. The Pope found them to be innocent. And when you read the newspaper articles about this, they don't mention really what they confessed to. Mm-hmm. So it's being presented as though, the Templars were never guilty. And what the Vatican was trying to do was put the blame for the whole thing on the King of France and say, their man, the Pope at the time, was just manipulated into doing this. Mm-hmm. And I think also they just wanted to make themselves look good because this was, these were their guys. They chartered the Templars. So, it's always sort of been a mark on their history that they, fostered and allowed these people to, be at the forefront of the Crusades for 200 years with all this stuff going on.
Right.
So, so anyway, the truth is that that's not what happened at all. They weren't innocent. They confessed, and they were absolved by the Pope. They were forgiven.
Right.
Not as though they weren't guilty. It was just, you say some Hail Marys and you're forgiven. But yeah, it doesn't take away at all from the truth of what they confessed.
So now one of the major confessions and breakthroughs that most people, I think, think about when it comes to the Templars is this worship of something called Baphomet.
Right.
And Baphomet has been portrayed by Eliphas Levi as this goat-headed, half human, half goat with reptilian skin. And what is this thing? People think it's a demon, but what does your research tell you about Baphomet?
Well, so Baphomet, just to fit him into the story here, this is this demon that they were accused of worshiping during these blasphemous rituals. And again, it's one of the most consistent things to come out of all of their confessions. In the confessions, they're describing it as a head. And there's various descriptions. So some people seem to be describing it as an actual mummified human head. Some people said it was a skull. Some people said it was like a bust, a sculpture. And then of the sculptures, there were described heads that were like a Janus head, 2 heads, sometimes 3. So what they said was that they used it for divination, and it was kind of their god, their patron god. They spoke to it. It gave them, they said, wisdom. It made them rich. It made their crops grow. They basically worshipped it as a god. After the trials, the subject got forgotten for a while, I would say. And then in the 1800s, some people started writing about it. One of them was this guy named Joseph von Hammer Purgstall. He wrote this book that was in Latin, but it was all about, he had found some artifacts that he said had come from places that had belonged to the Templars, like churches and stuff. And by artifacts, I mean there were caskets, bowls, coins, and also actual idols, and also there were depictions of the idols on some of the other items. So it got several different pictures of this idol that has horns and it's like a humanoid with horns, and it's hermaphroditic. So what's interesting, but he said that this was Baphomet, and actually he said it was meat. It was the name of the figure, and I mean, it was kind of like Cybele, he said. And when you look at the pictures, it looks very much like the typical depiction of the goddess Cybele. She's got a crown with towers on it, but Cybele is not normally hermaphroditic, so this is a variation on that. So he thought that they were they had kind of a syncretist religion that they kind of made up themselves, but it includes Gnosticism and these Cybele rites I was telling you about. And yeah, he thought that Baphomet was basically a hermaphroditic creature, not just a head. But he had some of the head idols in his pictures also. But yeah, so he contributed this idea that Baphomet was a hermaphroditic goat creature.
Right.
And then that got picked up by several other writers, like Eliphas Levi. That was probably 30 years after this book came out, and he actually references it in his work. Eliphas Levi was an occult writer, and if anyone's seen like the most popular tarot deck, the Rider Waite tarot deck, a lot of that stuff is inspired by Eliphas Levi, and the devil in that deck looks a lot like Eliphas Levi's depiction of Baphomet.
Right.
The way he depicted Baphomet became sort of iconic. Like I would say, when people think about the devil, they kind of think about Eliphas Levi's picture. So this figure that wasn't necessarily the devil in the beginning became, the devil in sort of Western occult literature from that point on. And Baphomet became sort of the patron of a lot of the Western occult orders. I mean, I think that there's Baphomet influence in the Freemasons, and definitely there's this group called the OTO now, started by Aleister Crowley, and Aleister Crowley called himself Baphomet. He basically felt like that he was an incarnation of Baphomet in a way.
Right.
So,
but it's not really necessarily a satanic tradition. It's more about what you mentioned, Gnosticism. It seems to me like this is more of a Gnostic tradition. So what is the Gnostic tradition as we understand it, and how perhaps were the Templars influenced by this Gnostic lineage? Well,
Gnosticism's kind of a broad category, and what I found was that there were a lot of different interpretations of it. But I would say the most consistent thing is that they all thought that the God of the Bible was not the highest God, and the Creator God was not the highest God. So basically they thought we're in some kind of a prison made by that false Creator God, and there's a higher reality beyond that he's keeping us from, and a higher God beyond that nobody knows.
So basically, the serpent in the Adam and Eve story, for example, is actually a liberator in that sense. No?
Right. Yeah. Some of the darker, I would say, Gnostic groups really, to me, it's almost like Satanism, or what Satanism became later, because it's a complete reversal of Judeo-Christian belief. And so, like you just mentioned, the demon or the villains of the Bible became their heroes, and. But here's where it gets even darker. Okay, many of those groups were described by the church fathers writing about all the different heresies that existed at that time. They said that a lot of these groups were engaging in these same kind of sick rituals like I was just describing the Templars doing. So interestingly, the ritual kissing on the behind, it shows up over and over again in these groups. Sometimes it's an animal like a goat or a cat. And then all of these just very deviant sex rites involving children, and some of these groups have this idea that you shouldn't procreate through sex, because that's like locking a soul into this prison, and so they want to deny the Creator that that victory. So some of them would basically do a ritual sacrifice of a child if it happened to result from their sex rituals, and they said that they were basically scoring a victory on the Creator God by doing that. And interestingly, this stuff does show up also in the artifacts that Joseph von Hammer Purgstall wrote about. So
the sex rituals mean
their sex rituals are all over these artifacts. I mean, you see people engaging in it with men with each other, men raping boys, men having sex with animals, and then there's this very interesting inscription that showed up on several of the artifacts. And remember, I said that. He said that Meat was the name of the goddess, and Baphomet was
M-E-T-E?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so Baphomet means baptism of meat, meat being wisdom. Uh-huh. So the interpretation of Baphomet as being baptism of wisdom has been around since the beginning, actually. So anyway, on these artifacts, there's this inscription, and it says this: "The distinguished charity of meat uproots the enemy." Now, distinguished is like peculiar. That's how I interpret it. And charity, the word that was translated from that it just means love, basically, and it can be interpreted as both brotherly love or sexual love. And I think that if Hammer Purgstall is right, which I think is quite possible, then the Templars kind of saw both of those types of love as being the same. That you should have sexual love with your brother. Well, so when they say distinguished charity of meat uproots the enemy, they're saying the strange love of meat uproots the enemy. The enemy is the demiurge. And they also saw the planets as being his, they called them archons, his minions, basically. Right. They control our fate. So
the demiurge being the Jehovah, the Judeo-Christian God.
Right, and and the planets, his minions. They thought of, like a lot of people who are into astrology think that the planets and stars control our fate, and that was very common in the old world. So it was something that everyone would have understood. So on one of those caskets that Hammer Purgstall wrote about, you actually see Meat standing there naked. She's holding these chains, and they're hooked up to the ceiling, or they're going up. They're pulling these two. There's a sun and a moon on either side, so the chains are pulling the sun and the moon down. You can tell because they're upside down. She's pulling them down, and you got this inscription there. So I really kind of think that this is saying that there is a way to actually destroy God's creation by doing this, and I think that might have been one of their overall goals, really.
So essentially, what we're saying is that these blasphemous practices, and obviously I don't think it's limited to the Templars, because we've obviously seen very similar activities within the church itself, right? Yeah. Pederasty and homosexuality and who knows what other activities beyond. And obviously you mentioned Crowley and the Gnostic tradition thereafter. So the idea is that this Gnostic tradition is ultimately trying to sort of negate sort of the physical natural order, natural laws, natural boundaries, and to try for purposes of spiritual liberation and wisdom. Is that the idea?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to believe, and that's why I think a lot of people, a lot of scholars who write about Gnostics have thought, these charges can't possibly be true, because how could anyone think that raping children and killing babies is spiritually enlightening? But if you look at the mindset behind it, you can see how it sort of makes sense, if you're crazy enough to believe that. And so,
well, one example. Obviously, the Templars were very powerful in their time, and they did have this massive banking network, right? And it does seem that they may have even had an influence to the present day in the formation of these banking apparatuses, right? So the banking structures, let's say, for the modern world, even. So, what can we learn about how they were banking, and perhaps what it might indicate for the esoteric nature of finance, and how perhaps there is a Gnostic component to the financial system that we are now still functioning within?
Maybe there is, yes. Well, I'll just go ahead and tell you a little bit about how they started the banking system and how I think it might have affected even modern times.
Yeah.
When they were chartered, they were created to supposedly protect pilgrims going to the Holy Land. That was their first job, and then they later became, sort of the special forces of the Crusades. But here's how they did that. They had preceptories, as they called them, like little walled, almost their own cities, basically.
Garrisons.
Yeah. They had them all over Europe, so you could actually travel from wherever you were in Europe to the Holy Land and hit one of these sites all along the way. And they created this thing where if you could deposit your money at the beginning and just have what they called a chit, which was just a coded parchment that said how much you would put in, and then every stop along the way they'll take a little bit out of your account, and at the end you can take your money out. So they invented the banking system, basically, and everyone kind of acknowledges this. Now, I've written a couple of books about what I call economic alchemy. Anyone who knows about how modern banking works, they have something called fractional reserve lending, right? So they can actually just sort of create credit and give it to people without anything behind it, anything backing it up. I just saw this as kind of analogous to alchemy, creating gold out of lead. And as I started researching this stuff, I found that actually there was a great deal of influence in the development of money over time by alchemists. And then you can actually see an indication of this when you look at some of the symbols that are on money. There's all sorts of alchemical symbols on money, even the stuff we use today, and especially the dollar bill. I actually spent a lot of time sort of decoding that. So I think that whether these people are necessarily aware of what they're doing and whether they've been, perpetuating secrets from Templars, I'm not sure. But it seems like some of the people that have made very important decisions in regards to the development of money were interested in alchemy. There's even some historical examples, like Isaac Newton was the comptroller of the currency for a while in England, and he was a practicing alchemist. Mm-hmm. And then later, John Maynard Keynes, the economist in Britain, ended up buying his alchemical manuscripts from an auction because he was interested in that subject too. I think...
Well, if we look at you mentioned you studied the dollar bill, right, and all the esoteric symbols. As we know, the Great Pyramid with the all-seeing eye at the top. There's a hidden owl, in the corner of the one. There's all kinds of, there's all kinds of esoteric symbols mm-hmm. on the bill itself. So why don't you talk about what those represent and how it could indicate, obviously, something more, a magical purpose behind it?
Well, I think with the dollar bill, they were trying to jazz it up a little bit. So, it came out at the time, this design on the dollar bill came out at the time when they had just taken the dollar off of the gold standard. And so I think they wanted to do something to instill people's faith in it, because that was the only thing that was bringing it any value anymore. Mm. And so you see all these messages like, e pluribus unum, and so, these are all things from, American history, but you put them all together in a way to make people feel like, this is uniting us together. And I think that you're meant to believe in the dollar the same way you would believe in God. Put your faith in this money. So another interesting thing, they've got all the 13s all over it. There's I think I counted 13 examples of the number 13 mm-hmm. on the dollar. That's a number that's associated with alchemy.
And also the Templars.
Yes.
Because of Friday the 13th being the day that Mole was killed.
There's that, yeah. I'm not sure. I think there might have been several reasons why 13 was sacred to them, but I think that it's definitely connected with alchemy. And Baphomet has, subsequent to the Templars, been interpreted by Western occultists as being representative of the power that allows alchemy to happen, and magic in general, that this is the force that transforms magically one thing into another. And so I think that, to a certain extent, that's the power that's still operating in economics today. And
well, we talk about magic and alchemy. All of this indicates a spiritual situation basically on the planet, spiritual being non-physical reality to the world that people either can believe in or not. But based on your experience and studying these groups that have practiced these rituals for a reason, do you think that there are entities, whether it be like Baphomet or other entities that are non-human, non-physical, that do exist, that do have power, that do have influence and power, that can help groups like Templars and other practitioners of ritual magic in their quests, for example, in their endeavors?
I do think so, and that's of course just my opinion, but I've had some experience myself. I've contacted some entities on the Ouija board before, and had some other experiences that made me think this stuff is real. And I think once you start looking at that story from that perspective, the story of the Templars, it all kind of comes into perspective. Like, how is it that this head made them, gave them wisdom and made them powerful? Well, because there really is a demon there,
Yeah.
So I think that's still operating in the world today. I think that Baphomet is still in contact with some of the people that are making, decisions today. And
so you think Baphomet is a real demon?
Oh yeah, no, I think he matches up with this entity that's described in the Zohar, this Kabbalistic book, as being the other god. And this is it's an hermaphroditic serpent, combination of Lilith and Samael, these two demons. But yeah, they described him as being the other god. So it's almost like this is the other major power in the universe besides, I guess, the Christian God. So yeah, I think he's real. And the other thing they described him as in Masonic literature is the sun of suns and the moon of moons. So look, this is viewed by a lot of Western occultists as being the most important secret, really, and the biggest power.
Right.
So, I think it's.
I mean, we talk about that. The Templars were disbanded technically by the Catholic Church, but would you say there are indications that the Templar order actually still survived in different forms, whether it be through Masonry and other occult techniques? I mean, you mentioned Crowley earlier, but for example, if their teachings and whatnot if their teachings survived, then there are those who potentially are in still positions of power who are practicing the same techniques, the same sexual rituals, the same bestiality, and potentially blood sacrifices as what the Templars were doing, no?
Well, there's the OTO that I'm not going to accuse them of doing anything illegal, but they definitely do practice sex magic, and they call themselves the Order of Oriental Templars. And then there's the Freemasons who, definitely try to tie themselves in with the Templars, and scholars try to argue about whether there's a real connection or not. But again, they're not thinking about the supernatural aspect. Okay. This is the way I see it. I think all of these orders have, at one point, someone contacting a spiritual entity and making a contract with them, and that's how these orders get started. So if you do that, you talk to Baphomet and contract him to be the patron of your order, then I think you are continuing the Templar tradition. You don't have to have a charter from the Templars to prove that, So I think that any of these groups that are doing that are a legitimate continuation of the Templars because they're in contact with the legitimate head, the outer head as they call him. So,
well, obviously it's a very dark path a lot of your research has taken you into, but would you say that ultimately your research is helping people to understand maybe the essential power structure of how the world works and can actually empower people by that knowledge and awareness?
I think that, yes, definitely, to realize that people in positions of power are contacting demons, and even if they're not directly in contact, they're maybe in part of an organization that is receiving, energy from a demon. This is an important aspect to realize. And people should really look at, like I said, the supernatural aspect. So many people are looking for conspiracies and trying to figure out how something was engineered by the conspiracy. But if you think about it from this perspective and realize that there might be spiritual influences that are really in control, inspiring people to do certain things on a grand plan that maybe they even don't know where it's leading. That's if nothing else, it gives you understanding of what's going on. I still don't know how to fight the injustice of the current power structure, but hopefully someday someone will learn what to do. I don't know what to do, but hopefully someone can.
But you can also resist the initiation or the overtures. If, for example, if you're interested in questing into the forms of magic, it's not only black, it's not only dark side. It would seem, right? You don't have to practice the negative. If you want to be, if you want to enhance your being as a person, let's say, right, and you're interested by the nature of the supernatural, you're interested by the spiritual quest. There's obviously two paths. So you can resist the temptations and the darkness. That's the opportunities that are offered by the dark side that can be resisted as well. No.
I'm sure, yeah, and even Baphomet, interestingly, has a light side. I mean, they basically describe him as being sort of a combination of God and the devil, a combination of the heavenly and the infernal. So this is always been referred to in Western occultism as the big secret is, can you somehow balance the greatest powers in the universe, the greatest conflicting powers, and tap into them both at the same time without being destroyed. And so there's some people that do that and go the bad way, the bad route, and then some people do that and retain their morality and are good people. So I definitely think that there's two paths. I even think that the Gnostics, like I was saying before, I think there were nice versions and mean versions. So yeah.
But I think that's a fascinating way to explain it. At the end of the day, it's like there are always going to be two options, but the middle path might be actually the sanest, the safest one possible, where you're not completely, you're not trying to pretend to be something that you're not. And oftentimes when you try to be too good, it can, as you end up with these orders like the Catholics and others who appear on the surface to be all-knowing, all-wise, all-loving, and then they're practicing things in the dark. It's almost like you're saying the middle path is actually the most powerful, the safest, the most pure and true, no?
That's been my estimation. I mean, I don't know. I'm so confused at this point. After looking at all this material, I don't know who to pray to. I don't know who the real God is. So, I think the safest thing is to sort of, like you said, stay in the middle and hope that it all clears itself up eventually.
Balance being the key.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Tracy.
Thank you very
appreciate
much.
your time.
All right.
Well, there you go, folks. Some fascinating insights from Tracy Twyman. You may not agree with or believe everything that she has said here, but I really urge you to check out her books because they're filled with details. As you mentioned, the Baphomet Mystery, 600 pages, really well worth the read if you want to explore more. The road to truth is a perilous path, but that's why we walk the edge of the buzzsaw. I'm your host, Sean Stone. Remember, you are the revolution.